What's up, you sexy people? Today we are reviewing perhaps the most well-known book in Stoic philosophy, and that is Meditations by the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Now, one of the coolest things about this book is that it wasn't actually written for an audience. Marcus Aurelius wrote these passages during his war campaign, so in a way, this book is kind of like his diary. What we have here are the thoughts and reflections of one of the greatest leaders of the Roman Empire. Now, this entire book is written in 12 smaller books, and they're each written in passages. Now, the passages are somewhat scattered, so it really doesn't matter what order you read them in. You can read the last book first, the first book last, or anything in between. This book is considered to be one of the best guides to living a deep and meaningful life. Perhaps the biggest lesson I think people can learn from this book is the idea of indifference. Now, of course, this is only to an extent. We don't want a whole bunch of psychopaths running around not caring about anything, but it seems like everyone is either chasing or running away from something. We all have vices and are addicts to our phones, social media, that new thing that all the horny boys and girls are doing, impressing people and buying stuff all the time. It feels like as a collective we've become a little bit mentally weak. We all seem to crumble under the pressure of opposition and become slaves to our impulses. To combat this, Marcus Aurelius suggests indifference. Simply not caring, not chasing things or running away from things, and just accepting everything as it is. Marcus Aurelius encourages self-discipline and mastery over oneself, physically, mentally, but also socially. He also talks a lot about the concept of human nature, which, if I'm being completely honest, I didn't really understand. He does talk a lot about community and cooperating with each other, and that going against this human nature is the worst sin that anyone can commit. He also talks a lot about being considerate of others and tolerating those we disagree with or that cause us harm. He encourages teaching others rather than dismissing or hating, which I think in the world today is a very important lesson. Death is another theme that Aurelius seems to have on his mind all the time, and his perspectives on it are actually pretty interesting. In some entries, he talks about not fearing death because it's a natural process, like a tree bearing fruit or a child growing up. And because of this, he argues, well, why would you be scared of something so natural? Other times he talks about how death is a release from all the bad stuff that happens in our lives. So again, why would you fear that? Dying is something that pretty much all of us struggle with to some extent, and it's really interesting to see just how at ease with the idea of death he seems to be. This seems to go hand in hand with the theme of change which runs through the book. The way he talks about change is poetic but also pretty obvious, and that combination is very, very powerful. He reflects on how all of us are in a constant state of motion, and so is the universe. All the things we aspire to achieve, all our problems, all our happiness, all of these are just temporary states that will disappear in the blink of an eye. We live fleeting lives that in the grand scheme of things will be lost to infinity. Everyone we know will die, everything we know will grow and change, all our names and achievements will be forgotten, and all of this is a fundamental aspect of reality. Nothing lasts forever, everything will change. Now, I'm no gladiator, but if I was to offer some constructive criticism to one of the greatest emperors of the Roman Empire, I'd probably ask him about the extent of his indifference. There's one passage where he suggests that instead of someone wondering, how can I be rid of this man, they should instead pray, how can I stop wanting to be rid of this man? Another example is where he says, instead of praying, how can I save my child, instead ask, how can I not fear his loss? Now, I kind of understand the point being made, and that is that you need to learn to deal with difficult situations rather than playing the victim and trying to change them. And I do to some degree believe that, but again, I think the context is very, very important, and it's only to a certain extent. There definitely are circumstances where your ambitions and emotional needs are your best guide, provided you have taken the time to consider them critically. You know, leaving an abusive relationship is 99% of the time the best thing for you to do. So being indifferent and coping with bad decisions is only good to a certain extent, otherwise it becomes somewhat self-defeating. I also disagree with his belief in gods and a human soul, but I do wonder if, given the luxury of scientific inquiry, I do wonder whether he would change his mind. Marcus Aurelius says in his book that he's open to changing his mind if he's provided with new facts, and yeah, I'd be very interested to see how true that statement would hold. Lastly, I'm unsure about his willingness to so easily accept death. We both agree that our lives and life in general is astronomically lucky. But he seems to believe that dying prematurely is something not to be feared. He acts indifferent, which is, yeah, no surprise, that dying young or old really doesn't make a difference provided you lived a meaningful life. But I tend to follow the words of everyone's favorite dwarf that death is so terribly final, while life is full of possibilities. I can understand that to be truly present, you have to get rid of this grasp that death has over our minds. And perhaps the idea of future possibilities is the last string that needs to be cut for us to truly live in the present moment. Anyway, overall, this book is definitely worthy of its prestige as a classic, but I do think that there are better books out there that convey these messages with more clarity. I still encourage you to read this book, but I would offer you 2 suggestions. Number 1, read this book slow. This is not a page turner. If you want to get the most out of this book, read the passages slowly and really try to understand what's being expressed. Number 2, read it twice. I say this because for me, reading the book a second time made it a lot easier to understand, and I also picked up on a lot of points that I missed on the first read through. Everyone, read this book or don't. It's entirely up to you. I am indifferent to your choices. But seriously, this book is worth a read, so check it out. I'll catch you guys next week. See ya.